Welcome back to the GovX Show, a weekly and sometimes more frequent discussion with public sector superheroes from here in the UK and around the world. I'm James Smith, Content Director of the GovX Digital Conference in November, and this week we're celebrating the start of National Inclusion Week by catching up with a wonderful supporter of ours, Bernadette Thompson, Deputy Director at the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. When we started work on the conference, the team committed ourselves to ensuring that we delivered a genuinely inclusive experience for all of our delegates. This meant that our agenda needs to reflect the world that we live in and provide a platform for the breadth of talent working in the civil service, local government and NHS. It also meant that I had to look beyond individuals who would be great speakers and think in terms of a range of perspectives that needed to be heard and represented. Bernadette was one of a number of civil servants who provided a lot of encouragement, and I hope to be getting some of the others, including Manisha Pathak in the Cabinet Office and Justin Placide in the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, in front of the camera soon. Their collective support enabled GovX Digital to become the first government conference to ever be recommended by the certifying organisation Diversity and Inclusion at Conference and Events. Something we'll be coming back to in our next podcast interview as part of National Inclusion Week. One last thing, we recorded the interview in Teams, and for those of you watching the video recording, I think you'll agree, it gave the footage a homely 1990s kind of vibe, which I hope you'll appreciate. But now, let's get this party started.
So Bernadette, welcome to the GovX Show. Great to have you join us at what I know is a really busy time for you. Just want our audience to get to know you a bit better in the run-up to the conference in November. But before we take a closer look at your work in government, I thought we could just sort of get a sense of what your interests are outside of the world of work.
So really pleased to be here, and I'm super excited and looking forward to the conference. My interest out of work, I'm a bit of a tiger mum. Don't let my kids know that. So I'm a school governor. I've been a school governor for at least a decade plus. I stopped counting. I used to be a long distance runner. Don't ask me about that. Was a long time ago. I live that through my kids now, but I'm an athletics official. So lockdown hasn't been nice for the season. It's totally ruined the athletic season, and I really feel for all those children who, were at the top of really waiting for the season. It was their last year in that particular age category, and it's just gone. But hey ho, let's see what happens, and the Olympics and all of that. So yes, and I sing. So yes, I do all sorts of things.
Great stuff. So as soon as I can work out how to integrate karaoke into the conference, I'll put you down on the list as potential participants then. So that's great. So we've got a number of delegates, obviously loads of delegates from the UK. It's really nice to see we're getting lots of registrations also from public sector organisations in Europe who are interested to sort of learn a bit more about what we're doing here in the UK. I think the furthest afield we've got delegates tuning in from Japan and Brazil, so all very exotic. So for the benefit of people who are tuning in from far away, what are some of the, I suppose, the sights and sounds that you'd recommend in the area that you live?
In the area that I live, I'm not sure Essex, any sites in Essex, but we've got Lakeside Shopping Centre, and the slogan is the only way is Essex, so you have to come down to Essex anyway. But in Westminster, where I work, I mean, we've got Big Ben, we've got Trafalgar Square, we've got the Houses of Parliament. So my work area is always buzzing with tourists taking pictures. So when lockdown is over and we can travel freely, it's really worth coming down on a nice sunny day and chilling out in Westminster and going on a Thames clipper and observing the sights.
I spent quite a lot of time outside of the UK. When I relocated about 5 years ago, it really took my breath away when I was walking around Westminster, because you get very used to it, but if you view it through fresh eyes, if you're taking visitors to London around, It's amazing to see how impressive people tend to find it. Obviously, as you say, full of crowds taking photographs. But so you're responsible for inclusion, wellbeing, and employee engagement at the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. Can you maybe just give our audience a sense of what this means in practice on a sort of day-to-day basis?
So on the day-to-day basis, so inclusion, I think it goes without saying. So really driving that culture of inclusion across our organisation, and more broadly, that fits into the culture within the civil service. I think it's always important to remember that, there are different elements of diversity. So really making sure that we don't just focus on one particular area. So, thinking of diversity of our workforce, have the diversity of our people, but thinking about place, where we make those decisions, so making sure that there's diversity in that place, but also thinking about the policies that we make and making sure the outcomes are diverse and, it reflects the communities that we serve, and it really lands well when we make good policy with diverse people. And finally, perspective, and that's, people have different views on this, but how do we make sure that diversity of thought, that cognitive diversity is brought into bear within the organisation, and people that have a different view are not really, making sure that they're not treated as outsiders, that we're making sure that all that diversity of thought is brought into the organisation and considered. From a well-being perspective, well, at a time like this, well-being should be at the heart of any organisation. So always, make sure that people open that conversation with, how are you doing? How are you, James? And really sitting there, not just moving on to say, where's that spreadsheet, that policy brief, and really sitting to find out, how are you, James? How was your weekend? How's your family? Really asking that question and checking in as an organisation. And then from an engagement point of view, all of that has to play into employee engagement, and just making sure the communication through some of this really difficult time is engaging. And, there's also a fun element. And so trying to be really creative in this virtual space that we all find ourselves.
It's interesting, you talk about the virtual space that we find ourselves. What do you think some of the, I suppose, the effects of us having to sort of communicate with our colleagues virtually has been? Do you think there's a sort of a silver lining to an extent that it allows perhaps some people to get more engaged in conversations and meetings than they may have done when they were face to face? What are the positives and minuses of this situation?
So I think that the positives, certainly there are a lot of positives in this. Look, there's space. The virtual space is limitless. So I always think about colleagues who are up there in Newcastle that wanted to attend an event in London. It's virtual. Just thinking about talent management and how we bring people on within our organizations around shadowing. Sometimes there's always an issue of, there's no space in the room, we really can't bring you in. It's virtual. So you can shadow any executive board wherever you are. You just be, your camera off and you're muted, but you're listening to the richness of that conversation and you're learning leadership in action. So there's so many benefits working virtually. But on the negative side, again, from a well-being perspective, sometimes people don't turn on their cameras for different reasons. So it's quite difficult sometimes to, get that body language or actually find out how a member of your team is feeling without you. You can't force people to turn on their camera. So it's kind of stuff like that. And then the interaction, I really feel sorry for extroverts, because they draw their energy from people around them. For people like me, it's been fine. No one just pops up at my door to say, hello, I was in the area. So, but I really feel for extroverts, because it is difficult if that's the kind of person that you are. So, they're positives, but they're negatives. But, we're a resilient bunch, the human race. So we'll get through this and we'll be creative and continue to change like a butterfly in metamorphosis.
I like the sound of that. So, but I think you put your finger on it. So literally the last two people that I've been speaking with as part of the GovX show, one of them was an introvert, was saying that she was having the time of her life, really enjoying, being able to sort of focus on quality work and lack of distraction. And then the next person I interviewed, another lady, was saying how as an extrovert, she was sort of really seeing the downsides of not being able to sort of, you know, form with teams and sort of feed off the energy of the wider group. So obviously it's a mixed bag, but
Yeah.
we will endeavour to endure and thrive, I'm sure. But so I mean, you have been in the public sector for a while. What got you started off in government and sort of?
In government, oh dear. So I started off during the old poll tax days, collecting poll tax. So I was in local government. Yeah,
That's a baptism of fire. But
I'm a good negotiator, but I tried so much not to make people cry. You know, I was a reasonable debt collector, so I did that. And you know what? I didn't plan. I just stumbled into the civil service. But you know, from a flexibility point of view, civil service is a great place to work. I mean, at a time like this, we have delivered, you know, incredibly well across the UK. I mean, just thinking of my department, MACLG, and I will have to give them a plug. You know, we all the boxes that we helped to go out to people who were shielding and, you know, some of the really difficult stuff, working with our local governments, and we've done that at home. You know, just, you know, the snap of a hand, everyone got her, you know, lockdown, and you had to be stood up to start doing something different. So yeah, I just stumbled into a public sector, and yeah, here I am so many decades on.
I have a 97-year-old great aunt shielding, and she was very appreciative of the boxes. So wonderful initiative. But so obviously in your career development, I'm sure you've been inspired by, and obviously inspired you know, many people. What's some of the best advice that you've received during your time in the civil service?
Take care of yourself, look after yourself. That's really important. Make time for yourself. I think find a good mentor, and the emphasis is on the good, not the mentor. The good. Find a good mentor, because not all mentors are good. I'm just putting it out there. Yeah. And I think don't be afraid to ask questions. That's one for me, because you get into situations and, you know, you get in charge of a particular brief and you're not quite sure, and you're like, well, I should know it. Don't want to ask the question, I'll look foolish, but you know, just ask the question. Everyone is usually quite helpful. So yeah, they're the kind of my top 3 tips. From a wellbeing perspective, it's just making sure people, we deal with really difficult, challenging circumstances. People really do need to build their resilience and find time to chillax. That's how I put it.
I like that, chillax. We might have an episode title there. Let's come back to that. So I mean, it's interesting. You spoke about having a sort of good mentor, the emphasis on good. What are some of the sort of the characteristics someone should look for to find a good mentor? Is it someone who is similar to them? Is it someone who is different and is therefore going to stretch and challenge them? What for you are the ingredients that make for a good mentor?
I think someone that really cares about you and your progression and anything that you're doing. That's the first thing. And someone that's not doing it just to tick the box. Well, I've mentored, you know, these different people and it's fine. So it's someone that really has an interest on your career progression, someone that makes time, that's not always cancelling the meeting, someone that challenges you and someone that holds you to account, and that person that actually tells you off, that, you know, pull your socks off, get on with it. So I think a combination of that. And where you find bad mentors, you know, those that don't, you're always cancelling the meeting, you know, they're distracted when they're talking to you, they don't do the actions that you've agreed to, all of that. It's not worth it. Just, you know, ditch them and find someone who really does care. And there are loads of good people out there, and I've had a few in my time.
Great. So the UK Civil Service wants to be the most diverse employer in the country. What do you think the civil service is getting right? How's it improved during your time in the civil service? And looking ahead, I suppose, what are the areas of focus that it needs to get to grips with now?
So it has improved during my time, I dare say. When I was growing up in the civil service, there was not really anyone that looked like me to look up to. And, you know, I was having a conversation with one of our directors, Kathy Francis. Hello, Kathy, if you're listening. And I was just saying, it was so refreshing speaking to her, because not many Black women about at the most senior level. So having that person that you can check in with, that you can just have that, laying it bare kind of conversation, it really does inspire. So having role models that look like you and sound like you and kind of get where you're coming from, that I think we can do more with workforce representation. I think thinking about there's obviously still more work to be done, and it's not just the UK civil service, across the world. I think we can always strive to be better. Definitely with representation, so looking at the data, and always say, let's start with the data, but let's not dwell on the data. And let's not say, can we cut it this way and cut it that way? And you spend all the time trying to get that perfect data pack. But with the data that you've got, how can you use it intelligently to make progress and demonstrate that you are making progress? And we have made some progress across the UK civil service, but there is still some work that can be done. What I was talking about before, diversity of place, and I think, UK civil service, this government has been talking about levelling up and beyond Whitehall, and it's great that thinking about, well, if we are making decisions only in London, well, what about people who live up in Newcastle, people who live, in the West Midlands, just making sure that we are as inclusive as we can be. So it is our civil service year of inclusion, albeit we are in lockdown, we can still make some noise, and we've got the rest of the year, but it's 2020 and beyond. There is work to be done, but we have made progress, and we will continue to make progress.
Now, some of the progress that you, I suppose, have been closely associated with is the race to the top G67 network. That's a cross-government community of Black, Asian, minority, ethnic civil servants at the deputy director level. Is that right?
No, so I wear two hats. So I always say my day job is my role within MHCLG, but I co-chair this cross-government race network with my colleague Anita. Hello, Anita. If you listen to this, when you listen to this. So 4 years ago, we kind of looked at the representation, and I know different governments obviously have different grade structures, but just below the senior civil service level, as I said before, just looking up and realizing, oh God, there are not many people that look like me. So we kind of got together and thought, we can actually, instead of whinging about this, we can get together and help out the civil service and curate a group of people from that community to kind of say, guys, what do you think the barriers to progression are? What do you think we can do? How can we help the organization to get better at this? And 4 years on, we are thriving, winning awards, but really making a difference and really giving that support to that community of people. Because when you've had a bad day and you've applied for one job and you're on the 10th refusal and you're like, life sucks at the moment. But when you're in a room of people that, don't worry, I got mine at the 12th time. So, your time will come. So it's really, curating those group of people, hearing what they have to say. That's rich qualitative data, playing it back to at the most senior levels and working with the organizations to make a difference. So that's what we've done for the past 4 years.
So, are there specific aspects that sort of the network has been focusing on to prepare members for leadership roles?
Yeah, so we do a few things. So one of the things, and I'm sure like in any other country, a lot of the organizations run by network, who knows you, who knows what you're good at, and have that been amplified. So if I was going to host a conference and I was looking for someone to actually organize it from start to finish, I thought, that James chap? Yeah. Let's get James, because James is fantastic. Did you see that Government X conference? It was absolutely brilliant. So it's that kind of, networking and just making sure that colleagues are visible within their organization, not because they're from a BAME background, because of what they're able to deliver. And we found that was the feedback from colleagues, that they just couldn't get into those little networks that existed. So that's one thing. Another thing is around what I mentioned before, shadowing. So we haven't been able to hold it this year because of lockdown, but over the past 2.5 years, we've run a cross-government shadowing scheme with our senior leaders in the civil service, where members can actually say, you know what, I'm in the Ministry of Justice, but I really want to have a career in DWP, but I don't have anyone that can connect me. So we got senior leaders who said, yeah, anyone could come and shadow me. And then we started matching people. You wanted to go to DWP, here you go. And it worked really well. And the feedback that we got was amazing. And people nurtured those relationships, and then it went on to mentoring and sponsorship, and some of that stuff works really well. What we do as well is bring thought leaders to our network members, kind of have a conversation, and especially start thinking about their profession. So I don't know, most other government organizations, we have professions within the civil service. So I'm an HR professional. What does that look like at the most senior level? So we would say, okay, Rupert McNeil, who's our Chief People Officer, come and have a conversation with the HR professionals and tell them what you think is required, leadership at the next level. So all of those kind of activities have really made a difference, and the feedback we get is amazing from our colleagues, and it's really great. It's an honor and a privilege to kind of co-chair that network.
I mean, I've got to say, on a personal level, you've given me a lot of encouragement when it came to sort of planning for GovX Digital this year, to try and ensure that the conference would provide the space for genuine speaker diversity. So obviously, thank you very much for that. And I think in the process, I realised that the good intentions aren't enough, and that I had plenty of blind spots, which I'm much more aware of now. And these are aspects of, I suppose, the assumptions I make, which have gone completely beneath the radar. And it's so, it's fascinating the way to sort of look and sort of see those in the cold light of day and unpack them and address them. But thanks so much for your support. And in terms of shout outs, also to, I think, Justin Placide at Bays, Nisha Pathak at Cabinet Office. So a whole bunch of people, including yourself, sort of really sort of encouraged us for this year. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So I suppose off the back of that, what advice would you have for, I suppose, people seeking to be allies in the struggle for greater equality, but who are perhaps very aware that they lack the lived experience to sort of really perhaps there's imposter syndrome, maybe, that they're not necessarily the ones who are qualified to speak on behalf of these issues?
And I think it's just thinking ahead. It's the 28th of we commence on the 28th of September. It's National Inclusion Week, and in my department we're going to launch an Inclusion Allies program, and this cuts across all characteristics. So look, I'll use gender equality as an example. At the time where you were the only woman in the room, but how did the men get it? Apart from realizing that and articulating that, and then actually saying to the other men in the room, so what are we going to do about it? So calling some of the stuff out, which is the first aspect, but acting upon it, because talk is really cheap. And I like Baroness McGregor Smith's The Race at Work report, launched a few years ago. It's the strapline is, the time for talking is over, it's time to act. So get to know a bit more, but there's some basic thing that you can observe, right? There are no BAME people in this room, that's not good enough. What can we do? So I'm not talking about promoting people. What can we do to ensure we're getting diversity of thought or a different perspective, from people with different cultural experiences? How can we do that? What can we do practically? So it's being an ally doesn't mean you need to know critical race theory or anything like that. You can be I just feel an ally. Everyone is an inclusion ally, because they're in every facet of life. They're underrepresented groups or marginalized groups everywhere. If you don't know, reverse mentoring is a really good way to actually know about a different culture and understand better their lived experiences. But for someone in an organization, and I'll give a shout out to my former reverse mentor, John Manzoni, who's no longer in the civil service, but it was so brilliant having a reverse mentoring relationship with him, because I'd say, look, John, I'm telling you this is how it is, but what are you going to do about it? And he really did use his influence to act and make change, and that is what is important. Understand, hear what, do a bit of research for yourself, because sometimes it's tedious if you're that marginalized group or underrepresented group and you say, yeah, woe is me, and you tell the story, and then you have to tell somebody else the story, and you're getting a bit of fatigue. People can research for themselves. There's so much out there, but the most important thing is acting and being that voice, letting it not be that ethnic minority or that underrepresented group to have to raise it. Before they raise it, you raise it and take action to make a difference if you're someone that has that influence.
So I mean, the upshot is that we, I think, have become the first diversity inclusion certified conference here in the UK in the public sector, and we got sort of top marks, I'm told, from the people sort of auditing us, and that's really, I suppose, the plan that we have to ensure that there's complete gender equality, that there's no such thing as a manual, there's at least 30% representation across all protected characteristics on the conference. So obviously plenty of work to continue to do, but certainly your support has meant a lot and helped us get as far as we've got to. So thank you again.
And I think, Sarah, just on that point, it would really inspire people, because that's one of my bugbears. Whether it's from the, just the looking at the flyer, looking at the leaflet, walk in that person's shoes. What would it be like if the whole array of speakers, you have no one that looks like you? I will not attend. I do not attend. So, anyone thinking of inviting me to an, panel that's not ethnically diverse or a conference, I will not attend. And I think it's those little things that help to shift the culture and make a difference. So if everyone is doing what you guys are doing, it won't be strange when you say, oh, there's a BAME person, there's someone that looks like you, get all excited because you're not used to seeing it. It will be normalized. It's just like how it is now. If you see an all-male panel, you're like, where's the woman? It's almost about, what happened? So we want to get to that point where everyone is calling out some of this stuff. But no, great job. Well done, guys.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So at the time of recording, which is sort of towards the end of September, I've obviously seen a lot of energy building as we count down to celebrate Black History Month here in the UK. It struck me that a lot of civil servants are sort of getting involved, but this is not their day job. This is sort of an extracurricular activity, and this, so it harks back to what you're talking about in terms of your own work with the network, your second hat. There's a lot of extracurricular activity going on. How sustainable is it for civil servants to have full-time jobs, but also give so much of themselves to the struggle for equality and diversity?
So I think this is really important. So there's a place for people like me who are, I lead diversity within my department, but there's a place with my second hat for employee network groups. And I don't care what anyone has to say about this. Now, in order for us to progress on some of these issues, it's not what are the top 3 priorities. It's a steady stream. It is cultural change. So you need a steady pace of activity to ensure that drumbeat of diversity continues. So I've got to give my department a shout out, MHCLG. So we really looked at that and really valued our employee networks, but realized that, it's difficult doing some of this stuff on your day job. But, with looking at the resource that's available, it can't just be done in HR. We need more than the people in HR to help us do this. So within my department, we really looked at, well, what middle ground could we give give our network chairs some time, bit of time, to help them organize events, especially like Black History Month that you mentioned, where they've Disability Day in December, thinking about International Women's Day in March. So, we really love to attend those events, but someone's got to do it and someone's got to promote it. So what we did is, got a percentage of their time that we say, look, we recognize that you do a good job with this percentage of your time will afford to you to conduct your chair duties. And a number of organizations across the UK and the world more broadly do this. And I have to give again Sharon Inkataria, The Power of Staff Networks. If you haven't read the book, go and read the book, find the book. I'm not sure how many copies are still out there. But what Sharon actually outlined was the incredible power of employee network groups and how much value they add to the organization, but also reminding employers that you need to resource your employee network chairs and those on their executive committees who take time out of their jobs to do this as volunteers. And sometimes there are some colleagues at really junior grades where they, it's really difficult for them to juggle their day job as well as, do some of these activities. So that's what we did in MHCLG. And it's really, we've driven a fantastic culture of inclusion. Our strap line, I don't know if you can see it out there, we are for everyone. And that's what we tried to do, but it's really difficult to do it just within HR. You need your employee network group. So anyone listening out there, if you want more information, buy the book, Incredible Power of Staff Networks, or go and read up about it. But employee networks should be resourced. Time and a budget.
We'll make sure that we put some details, links to the book in the show notes for the podcast. So great shout out. Appreciate you recommending that. I suppose before we wrap up, what are you excited to be sharing with our audience as part of the sessions? Obviously, you're part of a session that is called Culture Change in Government, but you're also going to be sort of making your own presentation within that, as well as obviously sitting on the virtual panel discussion. What are you most excited about sharing with the audience?
I've given some of it away, haven't I? I've given some of it away today. I think, someone like me can talk about inclusion and culture change all day, but I think what is important is for organizations to understand that their most valued resource are their people. The task will always get done if the people are in the right place. So just bringing all my roles together, thinking about inclusion, well-being, and employee engagement, the work will get done. Go the extra mile to make sure you take care of your people during this really difficult time. So we'll be talking about some of that in my session, and how it is important to continue these conversations around diversity, inclusion, well-being, and thinking of how engaged our employees are, because that will get us through the difficult times. So that's a snippet of what we'll be touching.
Great stuff. You got to leave the audience wanting more, so we'll leave it there. But Bernadette, thanks ever so much for joining us today to sort of share details about your journey, and certainly really excited for the panel discussion, which obviously I'll be a part of moderating. So until then, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I really love that conversation. You'll be able to listen to Bernadettes at 3 p.m. on the 18th of November at GovX Digital, where she's taking part in our session on culture change in government. She'll be speaking about her work in the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, and joining our panel discussion alongside Becky Thosby from the Ministry of Justice and Sean Moon, the best-selling author of Building a Winning Culture in Government. You can find the link to this session in the show notes, and if you work in the public sector, you can register to join the conference for free live, or pay a surprisingly modest £39 to access all of the recordings of all of our sessions for all time. Maybe not all time, but certainly a long time. In the show, Bernadette recommended a book by Cheron Inko Tarrier, The Incredible Power of Staff Networks. You can find a link to the book's website in the show notes. So thanks for joining us, and look out for our next episode coming at you very soon.